Talks. Cheers. Oh, got my decaf French vanilla. Yeah, that's good stuff. All right, guys. Running a couple minutes late. I had a kids swim meet that I was coming back in from, so watching my girls swim for their varsity team. But I am here. I'm gonna give you guys a couple minutes to jump on board. Hopefully, you guys received the text message that I am live. For those of you who are watching the replay, if it's because you keep missing me live, you can sign up for my text messages. All you have to do is text COSI Talks, all one word, just the way I wrote it in all caps. And you can text it to that number and you'll start receiving the text alerts whenever I go live. So I promise I don't spam your phone. I don't sell your information, none of that garbage. I just send out a link whenever I go live and I let you know when I'm about ready to go live. So just make it easy for those of you who are watching the replay and you keep missing the live show. If you're watching the replay because you want to watch the replay, thank you again for watching, and make sure you hit replay in the comments section. Give me a shout out. Let me know how you are. And if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to put them in as well. Hey guys, I see some people popping on board. We got Eric and Kimberly listening in from the YouTube channel. So I am broadcasting to my YouTube channel as well as Facebook. Hey Tom, man, it was good chatting with you today on Facebook Messenger. We got Sandra coming in from Gator Country. Let's see. Thomas, you're hilarious. He says, what, like a tapeworm? What kind of weight loss regimen is that? So yeah, okay, we'll talk about that. But yes, that was a question that came in this week, is whether or not I offer a weight loss program. Yeah, I'm not into the whole parasitic type thing. Nope, sorry, Thomas, sorry to disappoint you there. Let's see, we got Brian coming in with his Bustelo. Brian, cheers. It's been a while since I've had my decaf, but I had just enough time to scrape in from that swim meet to make myself a cup. Jill says, shouldn't be so hard to find you. Put a good link in the text. I did, guys. I have been putting the links to both my Facebook and YouTube channel in my phone. So those of you who are receiving the text messages, are you able to use the link from the text message I sent you? Can y'all just comment in there? I'm still getting used to this texting service, so I appreciate constructive feedback. We got Pastor David on board. Oh man, thanks for joining in. We got Denise coming in from North Carolina. There's my Tar Heel. We got Jesse. I am so glad that you're here live as well. Hey, Emily from Central PA. She's got her Simply Spiked Blueberry Lemonade. Emily always has very interesting drinks and good questions. So Emily, I do have all your questions, and we're going to get to them tonight. So she got her prosthesis and her KFO on Friday and Lift on the Right Shoe today, all in time for her birthday tomorrow. Well, happy early birthday to you, Emily. Thank you for joining us. We got Mark S. on board. Ben Gregory, you're here. Oh my gosh. Ben Gregory, I am so answering your question first because he's been asking me this question for weeks now, and it just took me weeks to get off my duff and answer this question for Van Gregory. So Van Gregory, thank you so much for your patience. We got Rhonda Jones on board. Let's see who else we got. We got Kesha. Hey, we got, comadre, thank you for being on board this evening. The link did not work today. Jill, thank you for letting me know. Okay, some other people said it did work. Okay, so some of you are connecting with the text message. Jill, could you be more specific in which link did not work? And I'm just trying to figure out all the ins and outs here. Let's see, we got Pam on board from Indianapolis. All right, we got a nice, y'all jumped on quick tonight. I love it. All right, so guys, for those of you who are joining me for the first time, welcome. My name is Cosi Belloso. I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I've been a PT now for 22 years. It's going to be 23 years in December. Yes. Remember that, comadre, back when we were first starting out? All right, so guys, lots of great questions tonight. Some of them were left over from last week because we had so many questions that came in. And by the way, guys, that makes me a very happy PT because that's what this show is about, is to answer your questions. So before I get started, especially for my newcomers, that is my email address, guys. You can either text me your question, you can send it to my email. I answer all of my emails and I will find you the answers to these questions. So that being said, we're going to start with Van Gregory. And Van Gregory, I hope that you didn't give up your fitness adaptive fitness class for tonight. Sorry, I have a very loud device. All right, so Van Gregory was asking, do your blood values change when you have muscle atrophy? And I remember when he asked me this a few weeks back, like there was something tickling in my brain about certain blood values that occur with rhabdomyolysis, but it had been a minute since I've worked in a hospital setting. So I was just like, you know what, let me go review my notes before I answer this question, okay? So it's kind of a yes and no answer. All right. So there's a value, that blood value, that physicians will test for. It's called the creatine kinase test. And it can sometimes be labeled as a CK test. Okay. So basically, and this is kind of like, the physiology gobbledygook, right? It's a substance. The CK is a substance in your muscle cells that helps your muscle produce energy. Okay. So it helps with the creatine, and your body uses this to generate energy. Okay. So when there is damage, right, to the muscles or the heart or the brain sometimes, you're going to have this CK, this creatine kinase, released into the bloodstream. Okay. So when your muscles are damaged, the muscle cells break open, and some of their contents, which includes this, will leak into the bloodstream. Okay. So a lot of times the doctors might be looking for the CK values when they have muscular diseases, muscular dystrophy, or muscular inflammation. Okay. So it's more with acute injuries and also muscular dystrophy. So some of the acute injuries are called, one of them, for example, is a rhabdomyolysis, when there's like a severe damage to the muscle, and it will release some of this. Other things that you might see an increase in CK is with, like I mentioned, the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Okay. But when it comes to the chronic muscle atrophy that you see in an amputee, you're not necessarily going to see an increase in CK. Okay, so that's different. The muscle atrophy basically means that the muscle's not being used. So from a physiological standpoint, it just shrinks in size. There's no actual damage to the muscle cell that will release the CK into the bloodstream. Is this making sense, guys? All right, so let me just kind of recap this, right? CK is a value that you'll find, this is a little something that hangs around in your muscle cells that helps produce the energy. When there's damage to the muscle cells, CK is released into your bloodstream, and the doctor can measure that, okay? Muscle atrophy is not necessarily going to release CK into your bloodstream. So there's no real blood value that can track muscle atrophy. Okay. Now, another time you might see this CK test is in the case of a heart attack. So if you think about it, right, if there's a heart attack, that means there's damage to the heart muscle. So there's a specific CK value for the cardiac muscle. So some of you who have had some heart issues, some of you may have had a heart attack, you'll notice that your doctor was tracking some of your CK values, because that makes sense, right? The heart is a muscle, specifically cardiac muscle. So if there is an acute injury to the heart, such as in a heart attack, those muscle cells will release the CK into the bloodstream. Does that make sense, guys? I really love this question because it really just kind of tickled my noodle with the physiology. And this girl needs to review her physiology every once in a while. So I appreciate that question, Van Gregory. Thank you. All right. Let's see. What did Van Gregory say? Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you got your workout in. Okay, good, Van Gregory. Let's see. Okay, so Scott's here with his cold water and his Click Medical Yeti. And guys, you guys are going to get the chance to win a couple of more of those Yetis next week, because I've got Click Medical coming on board. We're going to be talking about the Revo Surface. And I have not one, but two prosthetists coming on board on October 11th. So excited about that. All right, we got Lori coming in from Illinois. Jesse's getting her new test socket on Tuesday. Yes. All right. So Steven says, I found a rehab at Bayshore Hospital or Hackensack Meridian Hospital in Homedale, and they told me they would take you, but we really don't work with amputees. There's a better program at a different hospital in another county. You're going to go ahead and give it a shot because I don't feel like traveling to another county over an hour, half an hour away. Well, the good news is, Steven, is a lot of the strategies that I use on my amputee patients to teach them how to walk are strategies that I learned from working with stroke patients and traumatic brain injury patients. And some of the best neurological therapists you're going to find in inpatient rehab settings, because that's where the bulk of that therapy comes into play, right? When someone's recovering from stroke or spinal cord injury or traumatic brain injury, the big part of their physical therapy is going to be the inpatient rehab setting, which is where you are headed, Stephen, right? So the fact that you have those therapists there, and Stephen, for what it's worth, tell them to reach out to me. I am more than happy to talk to other therapists and help them with plan of care. I've done it several times in the past where some of you have referred your PTs to me. They are more than welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to help answer any questions for them in that regard. But if you have a neurological PT, neurological specialist PT, they have all the skills that they need to do your gait training, Stephen. So there's that part. Yes, so Van Gregory, it was the CK. So again, Van Gregory, the CK is not necessarily going to apply to long-term muscle atrophy because again, muscle atrophy, it's not technically like an acute injury kind of thing. Does that make sense? So again, and this is something I checked with one of my physicians just to kind of make sure I was on the right track with this. So there you go. We got GI Jane in the house. She's got 2 legs. Girl, I haven't heard from you in a while. I need to catch up with you. Send me an update. Let's see. Kesha asked, should I continue outpatient therapy even though I'm trying to get a new socket for better fit? I keep bottoming out, but can no longer and more socks to pin lock system. So Kesha, usually what I did is when I was, if I was seeing a patient that needed a new socket and we just could not make the current socket work, I would put their therapy on hold. Mainly because I can't do my job unless the socket is fitting well. We can work around a socket, right? Because there's times where, you get a socket and then 2 weeks later you're shrinking again and we have to add socks and work with what we got for a little while. So yeah, totally. But if it's getting to the point where you're completely bottoming out, you've got a trillion socks on and it's hurting and it's not staying on properly, then you're just kind of spinning your wheels. Okay. And especially if you're using your insurance to pay for these physical therapy visits, you want every PT visit to be worth it, right? You don't want to waste a PT visit, right? Sometimes if I had a patient who had enough PT visits, then we would work on strengthening and we would work on range of motion and we could work on some cardio endurance using upper extremity ergometer while we were waiting for the socket to be constructed or fixed or whatever. But again, Kesha, if you're kind of having to squirrel away those PT sessions and you don't really have any to spare, then ask your physical therapist, hey, can we put me on hold until this socket gets fixed? Now, that being said, Kesha, if you get put on hold, you need to tell that physical therapist to give you homework assignments, right? To give you strengthening exercises that you can do without your prosthesis so that you keep that strength going and you don't lose momentum when you go back into your physical therapy. Now that's a part that I was a real stickler with some of my patients because you get the momentum going and then they stop because the socket's not fitting properly. And then when they come back, it feels like you got to start all over again. But it's possible to maintain your progress by keeping up that strengthening program. So Susan says, yes, I had a heart attack and heart failure. So that would have been, the CK, CPK, and troponins, all that kind of fun stuff is something that they would have been measuring. Let's see. We got Harsh on board from Richmond, Virginia. We got Patrick. All right. We've got Richard coming in from Arkansas with a great black coffee. Cheers to you. Emily says, my PTs and OTs mostly work with strokes and TBIs. And I can tell, Emily, just by some of the treatment strategies that you've been sharing with us that they're using with you, that they are. And like I said, when I was first starting out in the field, I would look to my senior neuro PTs and I would just be like, okay, whatever they're doing, let me learn what they're doing and apply it. Let's see. Okay, so Van Gregory saying, yes, it sounds like I just need to go ahead and have the muscle biopsy done. Doctor says it's necessary to determine why the CK remains high. Agreed, Van Gregory. And I wasn't aware that you were displaying increased CK values. So yes, definitely. You want to get to the source of that and figure out what is going on. But again, Van Gregory, and again, I don't have an MD behind my name, guys. We do learn a lot of physiology. We do learn a lot of the medical side in physical therapy school, but end of the day, MD is the one who's going to give you the definitive. But it is under my impression, Van Gregory, that long-term regular Joe Schmo muscle atrophy from amputation does not necessarily cause an increase in your CK blood values. Let's see. Jesse says, I hope to be back in PT next week after I get a new socket and a new prosthetist. So again, Jesse, just communicate with that PT. Communicate. Lori says, yes, I put my therapy on hold because I'm waiting for my new socket, leg, and foot, but continuing the strengthening and core exercises at home. Yes. Thank you, Lori. Oh, this is a good question. I haven't had this question in a while, but this is a good one. Susan asks, how many ply do you suggest is the most you should use before getting a new socket? Okay, so the textbook will tell you once you reach anywhere between 10 and upwards of 15 ply, it's time to start talking about a new socket. For me, I say when you start to lose function. Okay, so I have some patients, I've had some patients that at 8 ply, they're going nuts. Like they're going nuts because they've lost that connection to their socket. They can't feel their socket. They feel like they've lost their proprioception and they're all over the place. On the flip side, I have some people who have upwards of 20 to 25 ply and they're doing just fine. I don't know how they do that, but there are some folks like that. Okay. So it all depends on how is it affecting you. If you're walking and you're noticing that you're not grounded, that you're not feeling connected with the socket because you're having to continuously add on too many socks, then it's time to start having a conversation with your prosthetist, right? It's not to say that, yes, they're going to automatically get you a new socket, but it's time to start talking to them about it and explaining to them, not just, oh, it feels big. The key words you need to use are, it's impacting my function. It's affecting how I walk. I don't feel connected to my socket. I feel like I'm losing my balance, because those are the words for me that make me go, oh, wait a second, we need to start looking at this, right? Okay. And then again, there's like lots of little tricks that prosthetists have to kind of pad the socket and kind of make it fit a little bit more snug, because sometimes, insurance can be a little cranky. So we want to try to make that socket last as long as possible, but definitely something that you need to continue to have a conversation with your prosthetist, right? Let's see. Raina is saying, oh, Raina has phantom pain. What can I do? And I don't want more pills. Raina, I don't blame you one bit. Not a huge fan of pharmacology and narcotics myself to treat phantom pain. I know that several people need to, because that's how they are able to function. And in those cases, I say, okay, if that's what allows you to function. But yeah, I am a big fan of trying to find out, number one, what is the cause of the phantom pain? Okay. And I have a lot of videos, Raina, and actually you're on my YouTube channel, Raina. While you're there, hit subscribe, guys. Yeah, it's my shameless plug. I got to do it. If you guys haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would really appreciate the support. But when you go to my YouTube channel, Raina, and you look around, you're going to see a little section called the 2-minute chat videos. And I have definitely quite a few videos on phantom pain. I also have a video on there that describes the difference between phantom pain, phantom sensation, and residual limb pain. So whenever I have someone coming to me about phantom pain, I say, okay, we need to figure out what's going on, if it's really phantom pain, or is it something else that is looking like phantom pain? And I know that can get a little squirrely. And then figuring out, where is it coming from? What is the cause? Is it being caused from a psychological issue? Meaning, not that it's made up and in your head, but meaning, is it because of a little bit of PTSD, perhaps something happening from the trauma of the actual time that you lost your leg? Is it coming from the residual limb? Do you have a bone spur? Do you have a neuroma that could be triggering this phantom pain? Is it something in your environment that's causing a trigger, right? So finding out what it is that's causing it can also help you sometimes address it, okay? And again, if you go to my YouTube channel, I've done several videos on phantom pain, conservative ways of managing it, some of the pharmacological ways that folks manage it, and it's all on there. So I would encourage you to do that. Let's see. You guys got a lot of questions tonight. I love it. Love it. Kesha says, yes, my prosthetist wants to put me in a RevoFit with a pin lock. The only issue is that my doctor may not prescribe this type of socket due to the billing codes. I know, Kesha. And that's something that, like, I've brought it to the Click Medical team, and they're trying to figure out a way to make that work with the, I believe it's the L codes that can get a little cranky sometimes with the RevoFit. It's something that I know that prosthetists in my areas, they figure out how to make it work, because they do like the RevoFit system a lot. Kesha, can you send me an email and let me see what I can figure out Here's my email address. Kasha, send me an email and just say, Kosi, I'm trying to figure out how to get the RevoFit to play nicely with my insurance and see what kind of advice one of my resources might have for you. Okay, let's see. Sorry. Sorry, trying to read through these questions. Hey, there's Johnny V, man. Glad to have you here, Johnny. We got Jerry Ann from Arizona, post-op a week ago from revision on both legs. Jerry, how are you doing? Let's see. Jesse says, I don't want to wear socks. And again, guys, this is where I love my adjustable socket technology. It's something that I've really come to appreciate these past couple of years. So Click Medical is a sponsor on my show for the past 2 years. And they're a sponsor because I really like their product. They have a wonderful click reel. They have several different ways that you can put adjustability into the socket. We're actually doing a really big show next week on this. And there's even ways that you can put the adjustability into your current socket. So you don't have to get the socket remade. So guys, next week, you're definitely going to want to listen in. So put that into your calendar. Pam says, I don't use socks as an above the knee. I utilize a BOA. So does that take the place of using socks? In some cases, yes. So for example, with the RevoFit, it adjusts to the equivalent of 10-ply socks, right? So if you're someone who wears 8-ply socks, then this is a great little option for you because it could mean that you don't have to wear socks. You just have to twist the click reel and then off you go. If you have one of the previous models, you'll have a BOA dial, which is very similar. It's just a little bit, maybe a little bit higher profile, and it'll adjust just the one way, okay? But this is a great, really great product. And again, guys, next week, we're going to be going all into this next week. Hey there, Shima. Aw, glad to have you on board. Thank you so much. Let's see. Drew asks, what is my opinion on lanyard? My new socket going to be lanyard or pin lock whenever the insurance approves everything. Suction not working well with a shorter limb. And actually, here we go. Here's an example of a lanyard socket. I have nothing against lanyard sockets. There's many different ways of using suspension. So for those of you who are not aware, with the lanyard, and this is actually a little discombobulated, but basically it goes through and you thread it through, and this is how you tighten, right? So you're basically pulling it into the socket, and this is how you get it to hold on to your leg. So it's a type of suspension system, and I think it's perfectly serviceable. I know a lot of my beginner patients will use a lanyard. Some of my older patients will also use a lanyard. Usually my patients will tend to progress onto either a pin lock system or suction system. But if it's not working for you, then yeah, try something different. So, you know, Drew, the fact that you already know the suction's not working because you have a shorter limb, then yeah, something like a pin lock is going to give you a little bit more security, a lot more security actually, and the same thing with the lanyard. Okay. So yeah. Let's see. So Jane says, sorry if outside the scope of today. Nope, not at all. Hip flexor muscles on my AK side, I stretch them and then they go back to where it was before. Yes. So when it comes to stretching, especially those pesky hip flexors on the above the knee, and my below the knee amputees are not immune to this problem. They also have to keep an eye on their hip flexors. It is a lifelong pursuit. So the same way you have to keep up your strength, you have to keep up your range of motion, which includes the stretching. So guys, if you have, those of you who have my book, who's got my book? Let's do a quick Kosi poll. I'm gonna put you guys on the spot. Who's got the book or who is subscribed to my exercise video program? Okay, so with the hip flexor stretch, there's a couple of ways of doing it. We've got it prone where you're lying on your tummy, and we also have it supine for those of you who can't tolerate lying on your tummy. But yes, this is an exercise that you need to do on a daily basis to keep those muscles limber. And the reason why you're having to keep doing it for so long, come here, Bob, we haven't used you in a while. Okay, so prior to your amputation, you would have had the entire length of your leg and the weight of your leg pulling down, right? So it would stretch that big psoas muscle, iliopsoas muscle, right? Muzzle, good heavens, muscle. So that's the muscle, that's the hip flexor muscle that's right here in the front part of your hip. It's a short but very wide and beefy, big muscle, right? So when you're missing a part of your leg, right? So if you're an AK and you're around here, you don't have the weight of the bottom part of your leg to pull it down and to keep this thing stretched out. So that big, strong muscle is just going to overpower everything, and it's going to want to bring the residual limb up. Okay. And especially if you are sitting for most of your day, if you're not using your prosthesis for most of your day, then you've got your hip in that position to get tight again. Okay. So in here, I have some of the static, what we call static stretches, mainly where you are in a static position and stretching out that muscle. I also love dynamic stretching, and I find it to be very, very, very effective on tight hip flexor muscles. So I have a few of those exercises in here as well under the balance section. And dynamic stretching is basically where you're using the weight of your body as you are moving to stretch out a particular muscle. Okay. All right. Jane, good question. So Jane is asking for an AK, BK bilateral. Which of your books do you recommend? So right now I have an above the knee book and I have a below the knee book. I want to make one for bilaterals. I really do. And I am looking to see about funding to make that happen, because that's a huge project right there. In the meantime, I know I've had some of you who are bilateral AKs, you purchased the AK book and you're able to make it work. My bilateral BKs, you've purchased the BK book and you made it work. Those of you who are mixed, I would recommend purchasing one of each book because it just depends on which side you want to target. So if you're wanting to target your above the knee side, then you would kind of need to use the above the knee modified exercises versus the below the knee side. And it kind of makes sense when you look at the book. The other thing I would highly recommend, guys, is the video program. Here, I'm going to just put it down here so you guys can see. Okay, so there's the link to the video program. The video program has 150 exercises for above the knee and below the knee. So if you're a bilateral mixed, the subscription to the program gives you access to all the videos. Okay. And again, I highly encourage you, take these videos, take these books to your physical therapy appointments, especially for those of you who have PTs that perhaps are not experienced in working with amputees. Any licensed physical therapist is going to be able to open this book and be able to modify the exercises for you, because this book was written in PT language, right? So they'll be able to use this. And actually, Stephen, the Stephen that's going to rehab pretty soon, this might be something for you to consider as well to recommend to your physical therapists. All right, let's see. Ooh, Stephen, good question. Stephen asks, why do most prosthetic companies not make the socket in the house? They usually send it out to be finalized. Or made you know how other prosthetic companies that make the socket completely in-house, or do all of them send it out like that to be finalized? So Stephen, we actually did a show on this 2 weeks ago. Okay, so go back a couple of weeks in my video archives on my YouTube channel, Stephen, and you'll see a guy called Ronnie Dixon. He is a prosthetist. He's also, his clinic is one of the sponsors of my show, Prosthetic and Orthotic Associates of Tennessee. Wonderful supporter of the show, amazing prosthetist. And we talked specifically about that last show. So it's only like a couple of weeks back. We basically talked about how is a socket made, like what actually goes into making a socket, right? And one of the things we discussed is in-house central fab, where they send it out. Okay, and there's pros and cons to each. So, you know, we kind of talked about it a lot, and I gotta admit, I prefer the prosthetist who makes their sockets in-house. I think that when they're making the socket themselves, they're able to just make those modifications a little bit better. The person is right there. The turnaround is faster. I just like the idea of them having that lab in-house. Now, what are some of the reasons why a prosthetist may choose not to make their own sockets? The biggest reason I find is space. So a couple of prosthetists I know that they simply don't have the space in their clinic to have all of the equipment that they need. And if any of you guys have taken a behind the scenes look in your prosthetist clinics to see how a socket is made, I mean, we're talking about some heavy duty industrial equipment that can not only take up a lot of space, but also be very expensive. So that is usually the reason why. There are some prosthetists out there that don't have the skills. They don't have the skill set necessarily to make a good socket, and they send it out. Is there anything wrong with that? Well, if you're getting a good socket, then great. But if you feel like you're struggling with your socket and you're struggling with the fit and you're having a hard time getting modifications done and it's not being made at the prosthetist clinic, they're sending it out. Those are some red flags right there, you know? So again, when it comes time for you guys to start interviewing your prosthetist, that is certainly a question I would ask is, do you make your own sockets? Or for example, the other scenario is like for example, one of the prosthetists that I work with in St. Petersburg, their clinic is very, very small. It's a small clinic, but they have another location nearby where they fabricate their own sockets. And it's basically just a rent issue. It's cheaper for them to have the smaller clinic and in a good location where their patients can have access. And then they make their own sockets just in a separate place and location. And some people do that as well. But watch the show from a couple weeks back. Jesse, I'm not sure what you mean by tether socket. Do you mean like a lanyard socket? Can you clarify that question for me? Lori is asking, do I know much on the magnetic liner? Forgot the name, but made by Ottobock. Have I heard about it? Yes. Have I worked with one yet? No, I have not worked with one. I'd be very curious to, just to see how the suspension is on a magnetic liner compared to something like suction or pin lock or lanyard. So yeah, I certainly would be interested in learning more about something like that. Oh, those you guys got the book. Oh, thanks, guys. You got awesome. Love it. Oh, and Emily has a subscription. Oh, wonderful, guys. Jesse's asking, I've lost my right leg. Why does the left hip hurt so much? Well, Jesse, without being able to examine you in person myself, my first suspicion would be is that your left hip is taking more of the abuse because it's probably doing more of the work. It's very natural for an amputee to favor their sound leg after amputation. And again, that's kind of one of those lifelong battles that I mentioned before, along with keeping your psoas nice and stretched and limber, keeping your muscles strong, working on your gait mechanics, right? And trying to make sure that you are evening the weight between your prosthetic side and your anatomical leg. Okay, because the anatomical leg over the course of time will have and develop chronic overuse injuries. And this is actually one of my biggest arguments when I have people who say that they didn't have physical therapy and they figured out how to walk just fine and they don't need physical therapy. And I hear some clinicians that will also sometimes say this, and it just kind of, I actually did a reel about it this week, those of you who saw the reel. This is one of my biggest arguments as to why physical therapy is so important in the early stages, especially in the early stages when you're learning how to walk. Okay, when you're working with a physical therapist, we are the experts of gait training. Sorry, we're taking that one for ourselves, okay? So in far as teaching you the gait mechanics, the gait foundation, to get you as even as possible, to minimize the amount of gait deviations or limp, some people call it, when you're walking. And the big reason for this is to prevent injuries down the line. Okay, there's also other reasons for it. Number one, everybody wants to walk nicely, right? Everyone wants to have a nice looking gait pattern, but it's also more energy efficient, right? So if you're constantly depending on your anatomical side, not only are you wearing it down, but you're also wearing your cardiovascular system down, your cardiopulmonary system. You're going to get tired very, very easily. Okay. So this is something I would just take a look at, Jesse. Find yourself a physical therapist, have them take a look at your gait pattern just to see what is going on. Honestly, in my practice in the past few years that I've had my practice, when people come to see me with back pain, okay, that they've developed back pain as amputees, most of the time I can fix a lot of that back pain and alleviate it by working on their gait pattern. right? So they may not necessarily have hip pain on their sound side, but they'll start to develop pain in other places if they're compensating or not walking properly. Raina is asking, is there exercises for upper limb amputee in your book? Raina, no, and I do apologize for that. I think I've had actually an upper extremity amputee buy my book because they were also a lower extremity amputee, so they were able to use the exercises, and there's some core exercises. But Raina, along with making a program for my bilateral amputees, making one for upper extremity is definitely on my to-do list. And again, when I win the lottery, all that's going to happen. I can do that. Thank you, Stephen. Roll Tide. Let's see. Jerry says, my right leg is doing well, but my left leg's in a lot of pain. It feels like my tibia bone aches and burns. I do have a drain tube near the bone too, and I haven't seen my legs yet. No, and those drain tubes, those drains can be really, really tender, very, very tender while they're in. I had a couple of those drains myself when I had surgery and could not wait to get those things out. And yeah, so I really hope that improves for you. We've got Geert coming in from Ohio. Welcome. Let's see. I know Baka Boot Camp. All right. Oh, it's tonight, Marianne. Well, Marianne, please tell Kevin I said hello and that I look forward to hopefully joining him someday at one of the Baka Boot Camps. I love that. I want to go to one. Jerry Ann says that she has my book and videos, and as a bilateral, they both work well for me. Thank you very much, Jerry. Emily says I changed locations to go to a place where they make things in-house. Pam says, I agree. I've had both, and my current prosthetist makes them in-house. Van Gregory says, I've been stretching every day, several times a day, and it has made walking so much more comfortable. I've even noticed my strides are getting longer. Stretch, stretch, stretch. I mean, yeah, guys, if your hip flexors are tight, I mean, it's basically going to limit. Come here, Bob. You're on again. You know, if your hip, and I'm going to exaggerate the movement, right? If your hip flexor's tight, right, you can't move your leg back. I mean, look at how much your leg is supposed to, about 30 degrees of extension when you're walking, right? So if you can't move your hip past here, look at all that movement that's being lost right there, guys, right? How is that not going to affect your gait pattern? You're going to do all sorts of funky things to compensate for it, right? And again, it's a use it or lose it. You got to stretch it out or it's going to get tight. Mark says, I visited the back room at Hanger. They explained the process, showing me all the apparatus. Very cool. And I love it, guys. Whenever I go see one of my prosthetist clinics, I'm always like poking my head in the back to see what they're being made. I always kind of like love seeing the thermoplastic just kind of go over the mold and just kind of seeing that go down like that. It's kind of cool. Let's see. You guys have got some great questions. Okay, now I did promise. Oh, I should probably answer the question that I put up there. Thomas, I hope you're still here watching and waiting. So I had someone who asked me, do I have any weight loss plans? The answer to that is no. I am not a dietitian. I am not a nutritionist. I am not a weight loss specialist. I am a physical therapist. Now, that being said, okay, what do physical therapists do? We prescribe exercise programs. Okay. And yes, I've had to do a lot of kind of counseling with my patients over the years in terms of their nutrition and having to do some weight loss management programs, because in some of the cases, my patients, in one case I remember with my bilateral, he was simply too obese to be able to fit into 2 sockets. So we had to work on a weight loss program with him in conjunction with a nutritionist to help him with his weight loss goals, to get him into sockets. So when it comes to weight loss, guys, and we're actually going to be doing a show on weight loss November 15th with my buddy Reggie Showers and College Park. Weight management and weight loss to me is extremely important for my amputees, more so than the folks with 2 anatomical legs. The number one reason is the fit, right? If you gain weight, okay, then your socket is not going to fit. Okay. Second reason, many of my amputees became amputees because they had issues with diabetes and with vascular disease. Okay. Nutrition plays a very, very big role in this, and so does weight management. So if I see that I have a patient who is struggling with this aspect, yes, this is something that I do talk to my patients about, and I do make the appropriate referrals as I see needed. Okay. Part of weight management and weight loss is having an exercise program. There's a great saying that says you can't outrun your spoon, right? But you still need to do a little bit of that running. You still need to have that exercise component in it. You need to build that muscle. You need to get that cardiopulmonary endurance going. Okay, guys, it's been around for decades now. All right, and it's a simple formula. Calories in have to be less than calories out. So unless you have an endocrine disorder or metabolic disorder or something with your hormones going on in my ladies, this is something that it's a very simple formula. I do encourage, big time, I do encourage seeking out the help of a nutritionist or a dietitian. There's a lot of functional medicine practitioners out there now that are specializing in weight loss, especially for people who have issues with their thyroid, people who have issues with hormonal imbalance that's preventing them from losing weight. As always, guys, do your due diligence, research, the clinicians that you are hiring, make sure that they are licensed, make sure that they are qualified. But if weight loss is something that is holding you back from being able to use your prosthesis, if this is holding your health back, if you're at risk for losing a second limb because your weight is not under control and your diabetes is starting to get out of control and the vascular disease, then it's an investment into your health. Yeah. Now, the Cozy Talk Strong Body program, not going to lie, can help you with a component with that weight loss because you're building muscle and you're exercising, right? And that's a part of it right there. Yeah. So sorry, Thomas, no tapeworm. Not really my style. I like to do it just the old fashioned way, eating right and exercising. All right. So Sean is asking, what is the name of my book? Thank you for that, Sean. I appreciate when someone gives me an easy entry into a plug. All right. It's called the Cozy Talk Strong Body Program. So it's actually 2 books. This is my below the knee book, and I have one for my above the knee amputees. I also have the exercise video program, and I'll list it one more time. So in this exercise video program, there's 150 exercises for AKs and BKs, and the exercises in the book go with the video exercises there. So check it out. There's also like a lot of sample exercises on the main page so that you can kind of get a look at that. Let's see. Sorry, scrolling through here. Kesha's asking, what is your opinion about going to a chiropractor once you get how you need to be in your socket? Okay. It depends on the chiropractor. Okay. There's maybe 1 or 2 chiropractors in Central Florida that I would refer my patients to. When we're talking about chiropractors that are making manipulations, right, and cracking your back or your joints, I have a problem with that because I feel like when you are manipulating a joint, meaning you are moving it out of its anatomical location to relocate it, you are stretching ligaments in the process. And to do that repeatedly will cause laxity in the ligaments. And I have seen many, many patients that over the years of having chiropractic treatment, they are experiencing this. Physical therapists are also trained to do manipulations, but we use it a lot more judiciously. We don't use it as much. I actually very rarely use manipulation. Whoops. There you go. I do mobilizations, which with mobilizations, you're doing the movement within the joint's anatomical ranges. Manipulation is when you move it beyond the anatomical location and range. So often that I find that if there's any tightness within the joint, if there's anything in there that I have to mobilize the joint, usually I'll just do it within a mobilization capacity and I will not do manipulation. And then what I try to do is also strengthen the structures and work in the soft tissue around that joint to help maintain the proper alignment. I have, like I said, there's one chiropractor specifically in Orlando that I've watched a lot of her stuff, and I like what she does because she treats the whole body. She really takes a look at the neuro side of the patient and everything going on there. So I do like her approach. But in general, I would say go to a physical therapist first. Right. And I know I'm a physical therapist, so of course I'm going to say that. But I just find that if you go to a physical therapist who has good manual techniques, okay, and I've known several, they're going to be a bit more, like I said, a little more judicious about when to use that manipulation. And I think that's what you need. Hope that made sense. Hope that made sense. Let's see. What is my feeling on CrossFit programs? That's another one. I have several friends who are CrossFit nuts. They love CrossFit, that they are CrossFit competitors. I kind of think of it in the same way as bodybuilding. It's a very intense sport. I think if you're going to practice CrossFit, you definitely need to be in a gym that is mindful of whatever limitations you may have. And I'm not talking about, oh, limitations. We don't want to have limitations in our life. Look, guys, we all have limitations. We all have physical limitations. I have physical limitations. I've had surgeries and chemotherapy, and I've had 4 pregnancies. There are certain things that physically my body cannot do right now that I used to be able to do in my 20s. And that's okay. I will work within my limitations and I can still enjoy running and doing sports. But are there things that I cannot do or should not be doing? Yeah. And when I went, I remember I did go to a CrossFit gym for a couple of months. I enjoyed it. But I had to make a lot of modifications to the exercise program that the instructors were giving me. And they were great. These particular instructors were great about modifying the exercises. And I was very clear and very blunt about saying, look, guys, I like to push myself hard and I like to challenge myself, but I don't want to injure myself. And I know that if I do these exercises in this way, I'm going to injure myself. Okay. I might be able to get through the session today, but there will be an injury down the line. Okay. So if you are in a CrossFit program, you need to make sure that the instructor is aware of what your limitations are, and needs to know what your weaknesses are specifically so that you are modifying those exercises and that you are performing them at an appropriate level. Okay. Let me just give you a quick, for example, box jumps, right? I was doing box jumps. And guys, I'm a runner. At the time I went to the CrossFit gym, I was running 3 to 5 miles a day. Okay. Very fit. And I was doing, I think, 18-inch box jumps. So fairly high box jumps. And I did it. I finished the whole session, right? The next day I was in a lot of pain. I had injured my foot. Why? Because even though I was a runner, my glutes and my hamstrings and my quads were still not strong enough. So I was doing a high level exercise without doing the foundational strengthening work first. Okay. And that was on me. That was a mistake on my part because I was like, well, I'm just doing it. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Okay. So when it comes to something like CrossFit, have those conversations. I actually there is a CrossFit here in Tampa, that they have one of their instructors who works with people with physical disabilities. So they are actually adapting the CrossFit exercises for people who are in wheelchairs and people, I think a couple who have amputees. They actually gave me a call once to go down there. Okay. So it's possible. You just have to really be careful and modify those exercises. Okay. And if you're going to do it, you also have to be careful about your nutrition. This CrossFit, like I said, it's very intense exercises. You have to be careful with your nutrition. You have to be careful with your hydration because if your body is not being properly nourished, it's going to break down. It's going to break down. So that's kind of why I equate it with bodybuilding. It's a very high level, high intense exercises. And like I said, my friends and acquaintances that are competitors, I mean, they spend and they dedicate a lot of time to keeping themselves healthy while they are performing at that level. Oh, Van Gregory, my pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Nope, not on Amazon, Sean. I don't have my book on Amazon. It's only available on my website that I just posted there. Hey, Sean Brown, good to see you. Sean says, I work out 3 times a week. I use some of the exercises that I was introduced to as an amputee, and I incorporated my regular exercise routine as well. I started out doing 3 miles under 11 minutes to get my heart rate up. And then I started doing weight training in my own CrossFit training. Yeah. And guys, like I said, if CrossFit, if that is your thing, because there are some people that they love their CrossFit, then you know what? Figure out how to do it. Meet with a CrossFit instructor that's willing to adapt these exercises and willing to help you progress in a way that will not injure you. That's my biggest thing. And it could be even having them coordinate with your physical therapist, right? Just so you know, and again, this is not because I'm just a shameless plug. I'm a runner. I do a lot of running. All of my running strengthening exercises come from this book. I just do them with 2 anatomical legs instead of with 1 prosthetic leg. Okay. But these are the basic building block exercises, and these exercises can be modified. And I actually teach you how to modify them in this book as you get stronger. Okay. I think one of the things in our society today, which sometimes I kind of just, roll my eyes a little bit when I see all these fancy different ways of exercising, and I see people hanging from the ceiling with rubber bands and trying to do all these wacky exercises to strengthen themselves. Guys, when it comes to getting strong, okay, it's not so much which exercise and how fancy it is, it's how you're doing it. And if you're applying solid muscle physiology strengthening principles, right? That's what it really boils down to. That's the big secret on getting strong, is understanding muscle physiology and then understanding the principles of how to align your body, how to have proper form, and then how to progress yourself. And I just thought about this. I did a video on this 2 years ago. I did a really big video on this 2 years ago. That's also on my YouTube channel. So if you go under my COSI Talks 101 live events video section on YouTube, there's one there called Muscle Strengthening and Physiology. And I explain it all right there. Because I know sometimes people get caught up when they're like, oh, I should be doing CrossFit, or I should be doing Orange Theory, I think is another popular one. Some of these other, it's like, if that's your thing, wonderful. Go for it. Do it. If that's what's going to keep you exercising and keep you strong. But if it's not necessarily, and you're just feeling overwhelmed, go back to the basics. Go back to the basics, guys. Sean, you're saying you're missing running. Man, Sean, if you were here, I'd have you come over and do the runs with us on Saturday mornings. I've got a run walk club going on Saturday mornings here in Tampa, and I gotta say, I kind of love it. Love it. So, Sean, if you have a blade, what made you stop using it, man? What made you stop using it? All right, hang on. I promised Emily I would answer her questions tonight, so let me get to that. Okay, so Emily asks, can you explain the pros and cons of the different suspension systems? Okay, so Emily, I'm going to kind of cop out on that answer, and I'm going to direct you back to my YouTube channel. I do have 2, I think maybe even 3 shows that I've done on suspension systems alone, Emily. So go back, and actually I did one with Joe Mahan from Click Medical, and we did it, give me a minute, August of 2022. Oh, kind of proud of myself that I remembered that. August of 2022. So go to my YouTube channel, scroll down just a little bit, August of 2022. You're going to see a show that I did just on suspension systems. Okay. And I explain all of them and all the pros and cons to each one of them. I think it's a really important one because it's something that I think a lot of folks get mixed up on when it comes to suspension systems, that they'll mix up the shape of the socket with suspension. Okay. So it's 2 different things. So go back and watch that one. Can I explain, Emily asked, can you explain what limb lengthening surgery is? Dr. Shu mentioned it in his talk with you a few weeks ago, but didn't elaborate on it. I was just curious how they would make an amputated longer and for what reason. So I'll be honest, my experience with limb lengthening surgeries harkens back to my days of working pediatrics, where for whatever reason, the child needed to have their limb lengthened. Usually they had some sort of congenital disorder or something that happened that they would have either a leg length discrepancy, and they needed to lengthen one leg to make it match up with the other. So it's a pretty intense procedure. It's not for the faint of heart. It is a very painful procedure. What they would do is they would put an external fixation onto the child. So they would basically put screws into the bone. And then over the course of time, they would, kind of adjust the screws to kind of pull the bone and force it to lengthen little by little. And yes, it's a very painful surgery. In the past couple of years, I've heard about adults having this done. Um, for the ones that I've heard of are for cosmetic purposes because they simply wanted to be taller. In Dr. Shu's case, he's probably, and again, I didn't ask him this question, so this would be an interesting question to ask him, like, when does he use limb lengthening in an adult? So my Monday morning quarterback guess would be is if there is a leg length discrepancy in the adult that is causing, severe asymmetry in the gait. But yes, it's a very intense procedure. And it's something that is not for the faint of heart there. Let's see. Oh, here was a good, this question. I really like this one, Emily. This one you said, Emily says, I was able to take home my first prosthesis and my KFO leg brace. So she's, my amputation is similar to a Symes amputation. So a very, very, very long BK is basically what you are. Because my residual limb is still pretty long, my prosthetist had to make the prosthesis a little longer than my sound leg so that there's enough room to attach the prosthetic foot on the prosthesis. Because of this, my orthotist has to put a lift on the shoe on the sound side to even out both legs. So how common is this in people with similar amputations? I feel taller now, which is fine by me since I was only 4'10" before my amputation. Will getting used to this height difference or the weight of the lift make it learning to walk more challenging? Okay, so just to recap, on one side, she has a very, very long below the knee amputation, and on the other side, she's wearing a bracing pattern. So because she has a very long amputation, it's a challenge to find a prosthetic foot that you can fit underneath it. And that's actually the downside of being a long amputation. The good news is you have a nice long lever arm, right? So it makes it easier for you to learn the mechanics of walking again. The downside is it can be sometimes a little challenging to find a foot because there's not as many feet out there that are that low profile. I know College Park, they do have a couple of feet, and one of them they just came out with last year that are specifically for Symes amputation. So they're meant for people who need a lower profile foot. Okay, so Emily, that might be something you might want to bring up to your prosthetist, is just asking to see like, hey, College Park recently came out. And Emily, if you can, send me an email. And I know you're good about following up with me, and I'll find the name of that foot for you. And just to see if that might be a better match. So yeah, putting a lift on the other side, it is going to make it a little more challenging to walk because again, you're not as connected to the ground and you have that lift there. Is it impossible? I don't think it'll be impossible. I know you're working very hard with your physical therapist, and this is something that actually I would ask your physical therapist, like, what are their thoughts on this? Do they think that it's going to impede your ability to walk and feel the ground? Or is this something that they can, over the course of time, teach you and you can get back into it? So I'm very curious to see as to where that goes. Okay. Oh, y'all have kept me talking tonight. All right, guys. I am signing off. Before I do, next week, October 11th, okay? Click Medical is coming on board. We're talking about the Revo Surface, okay? That is a way to put adjustability into your existing socket. So guys, mark your calendars. I will see you October 11th next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. In the meantime, guys, have a great evening. And as always, thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening.